For 3 years, Whitley, a 33-year-old forensic accountant, lived a fundamental lie that my mother, Sharon, saw me as a valued family member, not just a convenient income stream. I paid her $1,200 monthly, believing I was helping securing a home for my daughter, Olive, and me. Then, the week of her 60th birthday, a white locksmith van appeared in our driveway. My mother waved it off, claiming it was for a sticky gate, but I noticed the man working on the front door. I flew out for a 3-day audit, filing that wrongness away. What did I find when I returned? My daughter's belongings, including her melted sneakers, scattered on the scorching concrete, a brand new lock on my door, and a text from Mom. "Your room is your brother's now. Come get your stuff from the lawn." In a matter of minutes, my entire life was upended. My mother, oblivious, was still planning her big birthday bash, convinced I'd just quietly disappear. Before I do, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. Let me take you back to that driveway, and the Tuesday it all came apart. Let me back up to who I was before that driveway. After my divorce, I moved back to Mesa with Olive and a job that pays me to be suspicious. I'm a forensic accountant, a certified fraud examiner. Companies hand me a mountain of bank records and say, "Find the money somebody stole." I'm good at it. I'm calm about it. I don't argue with people. I reconcile accounts, which is calmer and usually wins. My mother Sharon offered me the back bedroom for $1,200 a month. Why pay strangers? She said, when you can help family. So, I helped. For 3 years, I paid on the every first $1,200 into her account. No lease, just a handshake and a habit. I also paid attention. I was the one in that house who knew which bill was about to go late, which due date had teeth. My brother Brett lived 2 states away and contributed exactly nothing because Brett was rebuilding himself, which is what our family calls a man between disasters. Every afternoon, I pulled into that driveway, and the heat came off the concrete in waves you could see, and I'd carry Olive inside past the spot where her chalk drawings faded by noon. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself my mother saw how much I carried. A forensic accountant should know better than anyone how good people are at hiding what they don't want counted. I just never thought I'd have to audit my own mother. And the strangest part is that the warning was already parked in the driveway in white paint on the side of a van, and I drove right past it. In February, my mother announced her 60th birthday like a coronation. Big party, the backyard, a rented tent, 40 guests from church, and the cul-de-sac. She handed me the logistics, caterer, chairs, the playlist because she said, "You're good at this kind of thing, Whit." Then she mentioned Brett was moving home. His dealership had folded, his marriage right behind it, and a man like that needs a real place to land. I asked the obvious question. Where would he sleep? She waved it off. We'll figure it out. You're the strong one. You don't need this house. She said it the way you'd say the sky is blue. Settled, not cruel, which somehow landed harder. I let it go. 2 days later, a white van sat in our driveway. Valley lock and key lettering on the door. A man on a ladder at the front entry. I asked my mother about it on my way out. She didn't look up from her phone. "The back gate's been sticking," she said. "He's just doing the gate. The front door is not the back gate." I knew that. I'm a person who notices when a number doesn't sit right, and that number didn't. But I had a flight to a client site in 90 minutes. A 3-day audit where personal phones go in a locker the second you badge in. So I filed the wrongness where I file things I plan to come back to. I kissed Olive, told my mother I'd be home Friday, and I walked out the front door, past a man quietly making sure that door would stop being mine. I'd come back to find out the locksmith hadn't been working on the gate at all. Friday, 6:10 in the morning, I drove in from the airport straight to the house. The audit had run long. I'd spent 3 days proving a controller had moved $40,000 through a fake vendor, and all I wanted was a shower and my kid. I saw the clothes first, my things and Olives spread across the front concrete, shirts, her booster seat, a trash bag split at the seam, her light-up sneakers sat in the full sun, the rubber going soft, the little lights dead. I put my coat into the door, and the keypad gave me 3 flat red beeps, and nothing else. I tried again. 3 beeps. The lock was new, brushed nickel, still wearing the sticker. My phone buzzed in my hand like it had been waiting. "Your room is your brother's now." My mother wrote, "Come get your stuff from the lawn. Don't make a scene." I read it twice. The heat was already climbing off the driveway, and I stood in it and did not feel my heart do anything dramatic. I felt the cold, clean thing I feel when a spreadsheet finally confesses. I did not call her. I took out my phone and I photographed everything. The lock, the sticker, the sneakers in the sun, the timestamp on the text. 11 minutes of documenting before I let myself feel 1 degree of it. Because the first rule of my whole career is simple. You build the file before you build the case. I crouched on that scorching concrete in last night's audit clothes, framing a melted sneaker like it was evidence in a fraud case, because that's exactly what it was. My mother had just handed me Exhibit 1.
She thought she was getting rid of me.
She'd actually started my file. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Olive. She'd had a sleepover at her friend Maddie's, 2 streets over, and I needed her to stay put 1 more night without scaring her.
Bubby,"
I said, easy as anything. "Mommy's got a fun surprise. 1 more night at Maddie's." "Okay," she cheered.
"Kids are merciful that way."
Then I started loading my car, and I loaded her things first. The sneakers, the booster, the stuffed rabbit she can't sleep without before a single thing of mine. Across the street, Lorraine Pute came down her drive in her robe, coffee in hand, watching the way neighbors watch when they already know. "Whitley, honey," she said, "is everything all right over there?" I told her the truth in 1 sentence. My mother changed the locks while I was at work. Lorraine's mouth went thin.
"I saw the locksmith Tuesday," she said.
"And I saw your mother out here this morning early. Asked if I could get her number in case anyone ever needed to know what she'd seen." She gave it without asking why, which told me she'd already guessed. I sat in my hot car, with the AC fighting the dashboard, and made 1 decision out loud to no one. Olive sleeps somewhere with locks tonight. That part isn't negotiable. Everything else, the rent, the house, my mother could get in line. But my daughter was not going to spend 1 confused night wondering why her grandmother's door beeped at her. I pulled out of that driveway, not knowing where we'd sleep, only certain it would have a lock that answered to me. And I had a witness now, standing in a bathrobe, who'd seen it all. That night, Olive asleep at Maddie's, I sat in a motel off the 60 with a legal pad and did what I do. I added it up. 3 years of rent at $1,200 a month is $43,200 paid into my mother's account with no lease and no receipt. But a very clear trail, because money always leaves a trail. That's the whole reason I have a job. My savings were thin. Funding a household while paying rent to its owner does that. A deposit first and last somewhere new. Furniture for a 4-year-old. I ran the numbers, and they were tight, but survivable. Here's the strange part, and stay with me because it matters later. I wasn't panicking about the house. Most people locked out of their childhood home would be sick over it. I felt something closer to patience.
There was a reason for that.
A thing I'd done 2 years ago on a different bad night that my mother had clearly forgotten, and I had not. I'm not going to lay it all out yet, because that's exactly how I felt it. Folded up, waiting, not needed until it was. What I let myself think in that motel, with the AC rattling, was only this. She thinks she locked me out. She has no idea what she locked herself into. Then I slept 4 hours, woke before the alarm, and started a folder on my laptop. Top of the page, I typed 1 word, the same word I type at the start of every case I've ever closed: exhibits. By morning, I had 11 of them, and I hadn't even called a lawyer yet. I gave her 1 chance because I wanted to be able to say I had. Saturday morning, I called my mother. She picked up on the 4th ring, breezy, like nothing had happened. "Mom," I said, "changing the locks on a paying tenant is illegal in Arizona." A pause. "You're not a tenant. You're my daughter. I paid you rent for 3 years. Family helps family. Don't make it ugly. I need mine and Olive's things and a key. Your brother needs the room. You're the strong one." There it was again. That line like a coin she kept spending. I asked her to put my 4-year-old's safety above Brett's home office. She told me I was being dramatic for a woman who claims she's so calm. Then she hung up, which is its own kind of answer. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. Not my mother, my brother. Brett had texted a thumbs-up emoji and a photo. It was my old bedroom repainted. His monitor already on the desk where Olive's toddler bed used to be. "No hard feelings, sis," he wrote. "The office is going to be sick." I looked at that photo a long time at the wall where my daughter's nightlight used to throw stars across the ceiling, now holding a gaming poster. I didn't text back. I learned a long time ago that the people who win are the ones who let the loud people keep talking. So I let them keep talking. And I opened a browser and typed 3 words I never thought I'd type about my own family. Arizona illegal lockout. The first result told me everything my mother didn't know she'd done. By Saturday afternoon, my phone had become a chorus of people who weren't there. My Aunt Pat texted first. "Honey, your mother is heartbroken. Don't ruin her birthday over a bedroom." Then a cousin heard you moved out and left Sharon in the lurch. "That's not like you." My mother had gotten there first the way she always did, and she'd told it clean. Whitley wanted her independence. Whitley abandoned her family right before the party. Nobody asked me what happened. Nobody called to hear the version with a locksmith and a melted sneaker in it. That's the thing about a woman who spent 60 years being liked. Her word travels faster than the truth. And it travels with refreshments. I felt the old pull. The one I felt my whole life. Explain. Smooth it over. Get everyone comfortable again. I'm the strong one. Remember the fixer. I started typing a long message to my aunt, 3 paragraphs of evidence and dates, and then I stopped and I deleted all of it because here's what I understood. Sitting in that motel with my daughter's rabbit on the spare pillow. My mother's weapon was the story she could tell about me. Mine was going to be the record I could prove about her. Those aren't the same size, and they don't fight on the same field. Gossip needs an audience that wants to believe it. Documents don't care who's in the room. So, I let my aunt keep her version. I texted back 5 words. "Hope the party's lovely, Pat." Then I went back to my folder where nobody got a vote, and nothing got edited to make my mother look good. Sunday, I went back for the last of my things because I wasn't leaving Olive's books and my work files on a lawn for the recycling truck. My mother had moved everything to the front walk in full view of the street where the morning sun was already cooking the concrete. She came out smiling, not at me at the cul-de-sac. Just getting the last of it. She called to Lorraine, bright as a hostess. "You know how kids are. Can't launch them." I didn't perform back. I walked to the door, and while Lorraine watched, I put my old code into the keypad one more time. 3 red beeps. I let her hear it. Let the witness hear it. The small electronic proof that I'd been locked out of a home I paid for. Through the front window, I could see my bedroom.
Brett's poster.
His desk. The toddler bed gone. And out past the patio, behind the house, a new sign hung on the casita door. Desert Casita, now booking. My mother wasn't just giving my room to my brother. She was turning the rest into income. A short-term rental paying guests in the back, while she dumped a paying daughter out the front. So that was the real reason, not just Brett.
Cash.
I loaded the last bag, and didn't slam the trunk. I closed it soft. The way you close a drawer you intend to open again. She wanted a quiet daughter, I thought, pulling away from the curb. She forgot that quiet is exactly what I get right before I file. And there was a sign in her backyard that had just made my decision for me. We moved in with my coworker Dana Foster, my mentor, the woman who taught me to read a ledger like a confession. She has a guest room, a fenced yard, and 0 patience for nonsense, which is exactly the household a 4-year-old and a furious daughter needed. The first night after Olive was down, Dana poured 2 glasses of wine and looked at me over her reading glasses. "You unwind frauds worth millions for strangers," she said. "Unwind your own, Whitley." I told her it felt different when it's your mother. "It always does," she said. "That's why they get away with it. Dana's good at this." She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She told me I was underreacting professionally and that I should fix that. Then she did the thing real friends do instead of advice. She made a call. She knew a housing attorney at a legal aid clinic downtown who took appointments on a sliding scale and ate landlords for breakfast. "Her name's Claire," Dana said. "Bring everything, and I mean everything. The photos, the texts, the bank records, and that thing you keep not telling me about. I looked at her. Dana knows me too well. She'd caught the shape of the secret I was carrying without seeing inside it. There's a folder, I admitted. There's always a folder, she said, and clinged her glass against mine. Good girls keep diaries. Smart women keep folders. I slept better that night than I had in a week in a borrowed bed in a house with a lock that answered to a friend. In the morning, I called Claire Bennett and booked the first slot she had. Then I called the one other person I trusted, and he remembered something I'd nearly let myself forget. That person was my grandfather. Hank Walsh is 81, my dad's father, and the only person in this family who has never once lied to me. I told him the whole thing, the locks, the lawn, the casita, my mother's tidy little story. He was quiet a moment. Then he said the thing that put steel back in my spine. That house was your father's, Whitley. Rebuilt half of it with his own hands. Your mother got to keep it when he passed. She didn't earn it twice by changing a lock. He remembered something I'd half buried. 2 years ago, when my mother nearly lost that house, it was me who stepped in. And Hank had been in the room. I sat at that kitchen table. He said, I watched you save Ray's house. I signed my name as a witness because you did it right, the way your father would have. Don't you let her tell people you were a guest in a house you rescued? I felt the folder in my bag get heavier and lighter at the same time. Whatever doubt I had about being too much, Hank had just sanded it off. She's saying I abandoned her, I told him. She abandoned you on a driveway in July, he said. There's a word for the difference, and it isn't dramatic. It's documented. My grandfather, 81 years old, used my own favorite word back me. I laughed for the first time in days. Then he said he'd be at the birthday party Friday. Somebody honest should be in that yard. And I told him I might just take him up on that. I didn't know yet how much I'd need an honest man standing in those string lights. The morning before my appointment with Claire, I did what I always do before a meeting. I gathered facts. I pulled up the short-term rental sites, and there it was. Desert Casita, Mesa Sleeps for quiet family neighborhood with photos of the back unit, and in one shot the edge of my old bedroom window. My mother had already taken bookings. She wasn't just rehousing bread. She was building a little cash machine out of my father's house, and she needed me gone to do it cleanly. So I read the rules because reading rules is the most underrated revenge there is in Mesa. Running a short-term rental means you register it. You pull a transaction privilege tax license. You follow the city's ordinance. Her HOA's recorded covenants flat out restricted rentals under 30 days. My mother had a listing, a sign, and guests, and not one of the 3 things the law required. I sat there with my coffee going cold and felt that clean cold thing again. She built a business in my childhood bedroom and forgot to read the terms. I read terms for a living. Quick pause because I know some of you are living a version of this. The day I drove to that courthouse, I almost talked myself out of it. Almost let Keep the Peace win one more time. If anybody's ever made you feel guilty for protecting yourself, sit with that for a second, then hit subscribe because the next part is what guilt looks like once it finally grows a spine. Okay, back to it. I printed the listing, the ordinance, and the covenants, and I slid them into the folder behind the photos. Then I picked up the one piece of paper that changed everything, and I drove to meet Claire. Claire Bennett's office was a folding table and 2 chairs in a clinic that smelled like burnt coffee and other people's emergencies. She was maybe 40.
No nonsense.
The kind of lawyer who's seen every landlord trick twice. I laid out the photos, the texts, the bank records. She nodded along, unsurprised, until I got to the part where my mother changed the locks. Then she stopped writing. In Arizona, she said, a landlord can't do that. Changing locks, tossing belongings, shutting off utilities, that's a self-help eviction, and it's illegal even if she's your mother. Even with no written lease, you are a paying tenant. You're owed damages and likelier costs and fees. I told her about the casita too, the unlicensed rental, the HOA covenants. She made a second column on her pad. Then she looked up and asked the question good attorneys always ask, the one that separates a complaint from a case. Is there anything else tying you to that house? Anything financial? Anything in writing? I reached into my bag and took out a cream-colored legal envelope, soft at the corners from 2 years of waiting. I set it on the folding table between us. There's this, I said. Claire's pen stopped moving the second she opened it. She read the first page, then the second, then looked at me the way one professional looks at another who has done her homework. Whitley, she said slowly, do your parents understand what they signed? I didn't have to think about it. No, I said, I don't think they ever read it. They just signed where I told them to. Claire set the pages down very carefully. The way you set down something heavier than it looks. Then I need you to tell me exactly what this is. She said, here's what was in the envelope. And here's the night it came from. 2 years ago, my mother called me at 11 at night crying because the mortgage was 4 months behind and the bank had sent the letter with the ugly words on it. Trust sale. She was going to lose my dead father's house. I had $26,800 saved, money for a down payment on a place of my own someday. I wired it the next morning and stopped the sale. But I didn't hand my mother cash and a hug. I'm a forensic accountant. I have watched 100 families destroy themselves over money that left no paper. So, I did it properly. I wrote a promissory note for the $26,800 secured by a deed of trust against the house. A real lien, the same instrument a bank uses. I had it notarized at a shipping store on a Saturday. My grandfather Hank signed as witness. And then I recorded it with the Maricopa County recorder, stamped and filed. The way you record anything you want the world to honor. My mother signed every page where I pointed, barely reading, grateful and embarrassed and desperate to get past the worst night of her year. To her, it was paperwork to make the shame go away. To the county, it was a secured interest. So, when my mother changed the locks on the house she thought was entirely hers, here's the part she'd forgotten. I wasn't just her tenant. I was a line holder. I had been holding a recorded claim on that house for 2 years. And Claire was looking at the papers that were about to make my whole family sick. Claire set the note down and started building the plan. 3 moves, each one legal and quiet. 1. We sue for the illegal lockout in justice court for actual damages or 2 months' rent, whichever is greater, plus my costs and fees. 2. We send a formal demand on the deed of trust. The lien had sat on the title since I recorded it 2 years ago, so it would surface in any title search the second she tried to refinance or sell. The demand wouldn't create that problem. It would just call the full balance due and make clearing my recorded interest the price of touching the house at all. 3. We file the short-term rental and HOA complaints, which would shut the casita down and start the fines. Get me one more thing, Claire said. Any record of when the lock was actually changed. Intent matters. I already knew how to get it. I called Valley Lock and Key, gave them the address, asked for an invoice for my records. The technician had logged the job, and the keypad itself kept a timestamp. The code was reset at 2:14 in the afternoon. On the Tuesday, I flew out for the audit. 214. While I was badged into a client site with my phone in a locker, unable to answer, my mother had a man rekey me out of my life and write the time down for me. That little electronic timestamp, those 3 red beeps in reverse, was the cleanest exhibit in the file. Claire smiled the first time all meeting. 3 filings, she said. 1 envelope. When do you want to serve? I thought about the calendar, and I thought about a backyard full of guests, and I thought about everything my mother had taught me about due dates. Friday, I said, let the law pick the day, not me. That night, I almost didn't go through with it. Olive was asleep in the borrowed room, her rabbit under her chin, and I sat on the edge of the bed, turning the envelope over in my hands. Enforce a lien against my dead father's house. Put my mother's name in a court file the week of her birthday. It felt for an hour like I'd become the thing she kept accusing me of, the cold daughter, the one who'd lawyer up against her own blood. I called Hank because Hank is my compass. I told him I felt cruel. He let me finish. Then he said something I've kept ever since. Whitley, mercy isn't letting people rob you politely. Your father worked double shifts for that house, so his kids would always have a door that locks for them, not against them. Olive is his granddaughter. You're not taking anything from your mother. You're keeping the promise she broke. I asked him if Dad would be ashamed of me for this. There was a long pause. The kind 81-year-old men have earned the right to take. He'd be ashamed of me, Hank said, if I let you talk yourself out of it. So, I stopped talking myself out of it. I put the envelope back in the folder, set the folder by the door, and slept. In the morning, Olive asked if we were going to live at Dana's forever, and I told her the truth, the calm version. Just until I get us our own door, baby. She nodded like that was the most normal thing in the world. Children believe you when you sound like you believe yourself. So I made sure I did. Then my mother sent the text that erased the last of my doubt. My mother could smell it coming. She always could. Thursday, she sent a message so long it arrived in 3 gray bubbles. She wrote about the cake she'd ordered and the cousins flying in, and how a real daughter wouldn't drag her mother through court the week she turned 60. Do you want everyone to watch you do this to me at my own party? She wrote after everything I've done for you. After everything she'd done for me? I sat with that phrase the way you sit with a number that won't reconcile. And I let myself feel exactly how much she was counting on the same thing she'd always counted on. That I'd rather swallow it than make a scene. She'd built her whole plan on my good manners. I typed my answer slowly, because I wanted it to be the truth and nothing extra. I'm not asking, Mom. I'm informing you. Send. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then informing me of what I didn't answer that one. She'd find out Friday, with the rest of the yard. I will tell you because people always ask. No part of me enjoyed the idea of her panic. I'm not built for gloating. I find it loud and inefficient. But I'd spent 33 years rearranging myself so my mother could stay comfortable. And comfortable is exactly what had let her dump my daughter's sneakers on hot concrete and call it tough love. The kindest thing I could do for both of us was finally stop translating her cruelty into something I could live with. So I put the phone face down, and I let her wonder all the way to her birthday. Friday morning before the party, I filed. Claire and I walked into the justice court together and handed the clerk the illegal lockout complaint. The photos, the texts, the bank records showing 36 months of $1,200 transfers, the lock log with its 214 timestamp. The clerk flipped through it and raised an eyebrow. You brought more paper than most divorces, she said. I count things for a living, I told her. Claire's office had already sent the formal demand on the deed of trust by certified mail and courier, and the cloud on the title was, as of that morning, official. No refinance, no sale, not without me. We filed the short-term rental complaint with the city and emailed the HOA the recorded covenants, with the listing attached. For moves, 1 folder, and the same cream envelope sitting on top, soft at the corners, now wearing a case number on a sticky note. I signed where I needed to sign, and my hand was as steady as it is when I sign an audit opinion. That's the thing nobody tells you about doing it right instead of doing it loud. There's no adrenaline in it. There's just the quiet click of a process starting, like a meter finally running in your favor. Claire asked if I wanted to be there when it all landed. I told her I'd already decided I wasn't going to the party. I wasn't going to give my mother the scene she'd accused me of wanting. But I said, send my grandfather. He earned a seat in that yard. Then I went to pick up Olive because some Fridays a 4-year-old needs ice cream more than her mother needs to watch a fuse burn down to the powder. Here's the timing because the timing is the whole spine of it. Court papers in Arizona get served by a process server or the sheriff's civil division, and hours were set to go out Friday, the same Friday my mother had chosen months ago for her 60th birthday. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about it a lot. I didn't pick her party to humiliate her. I picked the first day the law would move, and the law's calendar happened to sit on top of hers. If she hadn't wanted a sheriff in her backyard, she shouldn't have changed the locks the week she scheduled 40 witnesses. She taught me that lesson herself years ago at that very kitchen table. Actions have a due date, Whitley, and the bill always comes. Meanwhile, Brett was making it easy to feel nothing but resolve. He posted a video tour of the new home office with my daughter's old nightlight stars still faintly glowing on the ceiling he hadn't bothered to repaint, and a caption about the casita being booked solid for the holidays. Booked solid with guests my mother had no license to host in a unit her own HOA forbade in a house I held a recorded lien on. Every brag was another exhibit. I stopped watching, kissed Olive goodnight in Dana's guest room, and laid out my clothes for the next day. Not party clothes, work clothes. Because Friday, I'd be doing the one thing I've always been good at, just closer to home than usual. I'd be present in my own way when the numbers finally confessed. I just wouldn't be in the yard to hear it. Let me back up just slightly to fill in what the family was hearing. 2 days earlier, my mother had gone to her church circles planning lunch and performed the role she does best, the wounded matriarch. A friend who still talks to me reported it almost word for word. Sharon dabbing her eyes over the potluck, saying her eldest had walked out and broken her heart, that she didn't know where she went wrong. Heads shook. Casseroles were promised. Not one woman at that table knew there was a melted pair of toddler sneakers in the story, because my mother is an editor of the highest order. She cuts whatever doesn't flatter her. I didn't go correct the record. I'd learned by then that you don't win a gossip war by gossiping back. You win it by being the one person whose version comes with a county stamp. The day after, I drove past the old house once, just once, on my way to drop Olive at preschool. The Desert Casita sign was still up, and a cleaning crew stood on the driveway between guests, the heat lifting off the concrete in those visible waves. The same driveway where my daughter's sneakers had cooked 3 weeks before. Strangers were sleeping in my father's house now, in the rooms my mother had emptied a family to make room for cash. I didn't slow down. I just looked the way you look at a number you've already accounted for, and kept driving. Olive asked why we passed Grandma's house. Just checking on something, I said. And I was checking that I still felt nothing but certainty. I did. The next turn came from the smallest person in the story. That weekend, brushing Olive's hair, I asked her gently what she remembered about the last days at Grandma's. Careful the way you ask a 4-year-old anything that matters. She told me cheerful that a man came and took pictures of my room with a big phone, and Grandma said don't tell Mommy 'cause it's a surprise. I kept brushing. I kept my voice the temperature of bath water. When was that baby? Before my trip, she said before I ever left for the audit. So my mother hadn't decided to evict me in some heated moment while I was away. She'd had a photographer in my daughter's bedroom days before she sent the first text, staging it for paying strangers, and she'd coached my child to keep it from me. That's not a flash of temper. That's a plan with a shooting schedule. I felt the cold thing settle in for good. Then I did the only part that actually mattered. I put down the brush, turned Olive around, and told her the most important sentence I know how to say. You never have to keep secrets from me, ever, even if a grown-up tells you to, not even Grandma. She nodded solemn, and then asked if we could have pancakes. And we did, because that's how you end a hard conversation with someone who's 4. But I'd heard it now, clear as a confession and a deposition. The whole thing had been engineered while I was packing my suitcase. My mother hadn't lost her temper. She'd run a project. And projects, unlike tempers, leave a paper trail. My stepfather, Doug, called me Tuesday. Doug is 62, retired, the kind of man who married into a loud family and survived by agreeing with whoever spoke last. He'd never once taken my side, so I almost didn't pick up. But he didn't defend her. He just talked. He told me my mother hadn't slept since the foreclosure scare 2 years ago. That she still woke some nights, convinced the house was gone. That losing Ray's house felt to her like losing Ray a second time. She's terrified, Whitley. He said she thinks if Brett's here and the casita's making money, she'll never be that scared again. She thinks your note is a knife at her throat. I let that sit because it was true, and because the truth about a person doesn't always excuse them. It's not a knife, Doug. I said it's a door. She's the one who decided to call it a knife. I felt for her. I did for exactly the length of that phone call. A woman so frightened of losing her husband's house that she'd throw her husband's granddaughter onto its driveway to feel safe. That's a real fear, and a real sadness, and it is still not a reason. Quick second. If this is hitting close to home, do me one favor. Share it with the one person in your family who always says, just keep the peace. Then come back because Peace was about to show up in my mother's backyard wearing a county uniform. Doug sighed before he hung up. I told her not to touch those locks, he said. I believed him. I just didn't think it changed anything. And it didn't. By Wednesday, my mother had figured out something was wrong with her plan, even if she didn't know what. Brett needed cash. The casita needed startup money. And she went to refinance the house to get it. Pull equity the way people do. Except the title company ran the search and found my recorded deed of trust sitting on the property, like a hand on a shoulder. The refinance stopped cold. You cannot quietly borrow against a house when your daughter holds a recorded lien she has just formally demanded. No lender will touch it until the cloud clears. And the cloud was me. So my mother did the thing she swore she'd never do again. She needed my signature. For the first time in my life, my mother needed me to sign something. And she called me 11 times in one afternoon to ask. My phone buzzed on Dana's counter again and again, that same flat, insistent tone, and I let it ring the way the keypad had beeped at me. A sound that means you don't get in. I finally answered the 12th call. She didn't ask how Olive was. She said, "What did you do to my house?" "Nothing." I said, "I recorded what you signed 2 years ago. You're the one who just tried to borrow against it." She started to cry, the performing kind, and I recognized the key it was in. "Mom," I said, "I'm not signing anything before Friday. After that, talk to my lawyer." And I hung up gently, the way I close a drawer I plan to open again. She'd spent 2 years forgetting the bill. It had finally come due, with interest on the worst possible week for her. Thursday, the machine I'd started began to print. Claire called with the updates in her flat, satisfying way. The Justice Court had docketed the lockout case and set a date. The Sheriff's Civil Division had our packet for service, the demand on the deed of trust included, to be delivered Friday. The city of Mesa had opened a code enforcement case on the unlicensed short-term rental, the kind of thing that starts with a notice and can grow into daily fines if you ignore it. And the HOA handed its own recorded covenants with my mother's listing staple to them, had issued a cease and desist, and ordered the Casitas bookings canceled. By Thursday night, Desert Casita, now booking, had vanished from the rental site, replaced by the gray word, every host dreads, unavailable. The income my mother had emptied her family to chase was gone before it earned a dime, killed by a paragraph in a document she had agreed to when she bought the house, and never once read. That's the pattern with my mother, and maybe with all of us. We sign the things that protect us and forget them, and remember only the things that flatter us. I didn't gloat to Claire. I just asked one question. Will my grandfather be allowed in the yard Friday if she tells him not to come?
Claire laughed.
It's a party in a backyard, Whitley, not a courtroom. Anyone she invited can stand right there and watch.
I thought about that.
He's not going to watch. I said he's going to witness. There's a difference, and it's the only reason I'm sending him instead of going myself. I want to tell you, I agonized over whether to go to the party. I didn't. The choice was easy and strategic, and the most adult decision I've ever made. If I showed up, the story writes itself in my mother's favor. The bitter daughter who crashed her mom's birthday to cause a scene. Absent, I'm just a name on the documents. And the documents speak for themselves in a voice no one can call dramatic. So I stayed home with Olive, a frozen pizza, and a movie about a fish. I sent my grandfather instead. Hank, 81, ironed a shirt and drove himself to the party he'd been invited to long before any of this. And he went for one reason, so that when it happened, an honest man would be standing in that yard who could say later exactly what he saw. That it was lawful. That nobody touched anybody. That the only weapon present was paper. I'll keep my mouth shut till I can't, he promised. But if she calls you a thief in front of those people, I'm going to tell them who signed where and why. I told him he didn't have to defend me. I'm not defending you, he said. I'm correcting the record. Your father taught me the difference. He called me from the road, the Kodiak in the background, the party noise already spilling out. Lights are up, he said. Tents full. Your mother's holding court. I looked at Olive asleep against my arm, and I checked the time. The service window was 7 to 8.
It was 7:40.
Stay near the back, Grandpa, I said. And keep your phone on. Hank narrated it to me later, slow and exact, the way he tells everything, and I've put it together with what 3 other people swore to since. The backyard glowed, string lights over a rented tent, citronella against the evening heat. 40 guests in folding chairs my mother had me reserve before she decided I was no longer family. The driveway out front was packed bumper to bumper with their cars, that same wide stretch of concrete that had held my daughter's sneakers, now cooling under the first merciful shade of the day. The casita sat dark at the back of the lot, its little sign gone, its bookings dead, though most of the guests didn't know that yet. At 7:45, my mother stood up with a glass of wine and tapped it with a fork until the yard went quiet. She gave a toast. Hank quoted it to me twice because he wanted me to hear it land. "Family is everything," my mother said to applause. "Through every hard year, this house has held us all together." People raised their glasses in the house. I held a lean onto a woman who'd changed the locks on her own granddaughter. And my grandfather stood at the back of the yard with his jaw tight and his phone in his pocket and said nothing because the thing that was coming would say it better than he ever could. He told me he was counting cars in the driveway just to keep his hands still. He got to 31. At 7:48, the 32nd pair of headlights swung in slow off the street. They didn't belong to a guest. They were the county. Hank said you could feel the yard change before anyone understood why. A sheriff's deputy in a tan uniform walked up the driveway, past the rows of cars, and the string light chatter dropped off table by table the way it does when something official enters a private party. The deputy stepped onto the patio and asked, "Clearly, Sharon Decker?" My mother turned with her hostess smile still on. Brett got to his feet too fast, laughing the laugh he uses to sell cars.
"Wrong house, officer," he said.
"Private event." The deputy didn't look at him. "Birthday girl," he said to my mother, not unkindly. "This is for you." And here's the detail Hank circled back to. The one I keep too. There was no sound, no alarm, no shouting, none of the 3 red beeps that had told me I was shut out of my own home. Just 40 people gone silent in a backyard, and my mother holding out her hand for an envelope she didn't want. In a quiet so complete you could hear the citronella candles hiss. For 3 weeks a keypad had beeped me out of my life. Now the loudest thing in that yard was the silence of my mother realizing she'd been locked into something, and that there was no code that would open it. She took the papers. Her smile was still trying. "There must be a mistake," she said to the deputy, to the guests, to the warm, dark air. The deputy was already turning to go. "No mistake, ma'am," he said. "You've been served." And then he left her standing in the lights with the envelope in her hand, and 40 witnesses. She'd invited herself. My mother opened the envelope in front of everyone because she could not. 40 people were watching, and the hostess and her needed to prove it was nothing. It was not nothing. The first page was the illegal lockout complaint, my name against hers, with the date she'd changed the locks and the 214 timestamp printed right there. The second was the formal demand on the deed of trust, $26,800 secured against the house, recorded due. The third was the city's short-term rental violation and the HOA's cease and desist. The casita shut down in black and white. Hank watched her read them in order, watched the color leave her face one page at a time. Aunt Pat leaned in to see, then said the sentence that turned the whole yard loud enough for the back tables. "Wait, Sharon, is that the loan? Is she the one who saved the house?" Because that was the part the family had never been told. My mother's tidy story had a daughter who abandoned her. It did not have a daughter who'd wired $26,000 at 11 at night to stop a trust sale and then quietly held the paper for 2 years. The 2 versions could not stand in the same backyard, and everyone could see which one came with a county stamp. For 33 years, I'd been the strong one who doesn't need this house. In about 90 seconds, in front of every person whose opinion my mother had ever cared about, 40 people learned that the strong one was the only reason there was a house left to throw her out of. My mother's hands were shaking. She looked up from the papers and found the only target available, the empty space where a daughter should have been, and then the phone in her own pocket. She pulled it out and called me right there in the yard. On speaker, she was too rattled to turn off. "You do this to your own mother?" she said, and her voice was already climbing at my birthday in front of everyone. Hank said the guests just looked at their shoes. My phone rang at 7:52. I was on Dana's couch with Olive asleep against me and a cartoon fish on mute, and my mother's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go. But I'd chosen not to be in that yard precisely, so I could take this call like a professional. So I answered, and I kept it low so I wouldn't wake my daughter. The party roared behind her voice. "How could you?" she said, crying and shouting at once, the words tumbling over each other. "A Sheriff Whitley at my birthday, in front of the whole church. What is wrong with you after everything? After I gave you a roof?" I let her run out of breath. You don't interrupt a confession. You let it finish. When there was a gap, I spoke. And I kept my voice exactly where it lives. Low, and even the voice I used to tell a CEO his most trusted officer has been robbing him for years.
This isn't a scene, Mom.
I said, it's a court date. She made a sound I'd never heard her make. I went on calm because calm was the whole point. You changed the locks at 2:14 on a Tuesday. It's on the log. You put Olive's shoes out on the driveway in July. And the house you locked us out of. I'm the lien on it. I have been for 2 years. There was a scuffle, and then Brett's voice hot in my ear. You can't take her house. I almost laughed. I'm not taking it, Brett, I said. I'm the reason you still have one to fight over. Behind them, the whole quiet yard was listening. Because my mother, in her panic, had never taken me off speaker. 40 people hearing every word travel out of that little phone into the string lights. I'm not asking, Mom, I said, and I said it gently, which is the only way that line has any teeth. I'm informing you in front of everyone since that's the room you chose. And I hung up and I went back to the movie about the fish, and I held my sleeping daughter a little tighter. What happened after I hung up? Hank told me on the drive home, his voice steady the whole way. My mother stood in the lights with the phone in one hand and the papers in the other, and she turned to the one person she thought would still rescue her. Dad, she said to Hank. She's called him Dad for 35 years. Tell them this is insane. Tell them what she's doing to me. And my grandfather, 81 years old, set down his glass and spoke so the whole yard could hear him. I'll tell them, Sharon, he said. I sat at your kitchen table 2 years ago. I watched Whitley wire the money that saved this house from the auction block. I signed my name as a witness because she did it right. Honest, recorded the way my son would have. She didn't take anything from you tonight. She kept the only promise in this family that was ever written down. Nobody argued with him. You don't argue with the oldest, honest man in the room. One by one, the guests found reasons to leave. Early mornings, long drives, a sudden need to be anywhere else, and the folding chairs emptied under the string lights. On the gift table, between the wrapped boxes nobody would open now, sat the cream envelope, its corners soft, its 3 pages spread where my mother had dropped them. Finally read by everyone they named. The casitas stayed dark. The candles on the cake burned down to nothing because no one remembered to blow them out. And my grandfather walked to his car past 40 empty chairs and called to tell me it was done. Here's how it's settled. By the numbers. Because numbers are how I make peace. The Justice Court found the lockout illegal and awarded me damages and my costs. The statutory remedy Arizona allows for a self-help eviction, a figure with my mother's signature behind it now instead of mine. The deed of trust held. The title stayed clouded until she dealt with me, which meant no refinance, no quiet sale, no cash machine for Brett. She's on a repayment plan for the $26,800 she once cried over and never repaid. Between the city's open code case and the HOA's cease and desist, the casita shut down for good. Listing gone, bookings canceled, the income dead before it ever started. Brett moved out within the month. An office isn't a prize once the house it sits in is a court exhibit. Doug, snorts, to his small credit, told anyone who'd listened that he'd warned her not to touch the locks. And the neighborhood, well, Lorraine had seen the sneakers on the driveway with her own eyes, and Lorraine talks. By August, half the cul-de-sac knew which daughter had saved that house, and which mother had thrown her out of it. I drove past exactly once more, dropping Olive at preschool, and the driveway was empty. No guest cars, no cleaning crew, just bare concrete giving its heat back to the evening. Cooler than I'd ever seen it. Strangers don't sleep in my father's house anymore. Neither do I. And that turned out to be the same kind of relief. Olive and I have our own place now. A 2-bedroom near Dana's. Nothing fancy. A kitchen that gets the morning light. I installed the lock myself. A keypad, because I have a sense of humor about these things. The first time I set our code, and it let me in. It gave 3 soft beeps, green ones, the welcome kind. The exact opposite of the 3 red beeps that had told me I didn't belong. Olive learned the code before I finished teaching it. It's our door, she announced like she'd invented the concept, and I told her she was exactly right. My mother called once after it was all over. She didn't apologize. That's not a thing she has in her. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she said. I'd waited my whole life to understand that sentence, and there it finally was. The whole problem in 7 words. I know, Mom. I said that was always the problem. We don't talk much now. The door isn't locked against her, but it answers to me, and if she ever wants in, she'll have to knock like anyone else. People ask if I regret how it ended. I don't. Being the strong one was never a gift my family gave me. It was the bill they kept handing me. And I just finally read the terms before I paid it one more time.
That's my story.